Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to PBA at Noon. I'm Paul Benwell, and I'm joined today with my colleague, Sophie Caesar. Joining us today is Peloton Minerals, which trades on the CSE under the symbol PMC. Peloton is focused on exploring deposits in U.S. jurisdictions with a history of hosting large-scale deposits. Part of Peloton's core exploration portfolio includes most recently a Copper Porphyry project near Butte, Montana. The Boulder Property was acquired by Peloton subsidiary Celerity Mineral Corporation in August of 2021. Here from Peloton to introduce the team is our friend Paul Teodorici from Peloton. Paul, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I just want to remind our attendees to ask their questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. There you go, Paul, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Paul. We certainly want to welcome everyone today to the presentation of Peloton Minerals Corporation. We have with us the president of Peloton Minerals Corporation, Ted Elwood, who will open for us today. And we also have Corey Safran, who is the president of Celerity Mineral Corporation. So we're excited about this, and you've seen me before. Now you get to see the whole team. So off to you, Ted, please.
Okay. I'll just get it set up here. There we go. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. I see from Sophie that we have quite a lot of people here today, and we certainly thank you for your interest. The primary topic for discussion or presentation today is going to be the Boulder Copper Porphyry project, which we most recently acquired. We are still moving forward with our Nevada projects, and I'm going to touch on those toward the end of the presentation. I think everybody's seen the forward-looking statement many times, so we'll just move quickly past that. Just for background on the new property acquisition and where we're going with it to some degree. It was acquired by Peloton's subsidiary, Celerity Mineral Corporation, in August. The Boulder Property is an underexplored, known copper porphyry system that's located only 16 miles from Butte, Montana, which was North America's largest copper mine and porphyry system. Peloton plans to spin Celerity out as its own self-funding public company in 2022, while retaining a meaningful interest in Celerity and, by extension, the underlying Boulder Property. This, so that you know, will also involve a dividend of Celerity shares to the Peloton shareholders. Peloton also owns 3 Carlin-style gold exploration projects on major Nevada gold trends that we've been bringing forward over the years, and 1 past-producing project in Montana that is under option to a joint venture partner. Now, before our shareholders start getting worried that all of these people are presently on the payroll, I assure you that they're not. But I did think it was important to present the, who the Peloton directors are, or again, and also who some of the key Celerity people are going to be, and or who they are now and are going to be. We're starting off with Peloton. Our chairman is John O'Donnell, who is a well-regarded securities lawyer, mining and securities lawyer out of Toronto. Paul Theodorovich, many of you know or have met many times. He is the Vice President of Business Development. Our senior geologist, Richard Capps, is out of Georgia, and he is regarded as an expert in the base metal, or pardon me, in the Great Basin area of Nevada. He's also been involved in discoveries in Suriname and other places within the United States. And myself, I'm not a geologist. I'm an MBA. I come from the business side of things. And over, I guess, about the past 30 years, I've been involved in supporting the business side of various mineral exploration projects, mine development projects, etc. And I think I come by exploration naturally because both of my grandparents were gold prospectors in northern Manitoba, Canada. And so from about the age of 10, I was out there banging on rocks looking for gold. And here we are many years later doing the same. As far as Celerity goes, Corey Safran, I'm pleased to introduce. I see his His screen still needs to come on, but I'm sure Sophie can look after that. Corey brings extensive background in the investment banking world, and also as a metals trader. So he will be giving us an insight on what he sees for the copper market in a little bit down the presentation. Michael Litwin, who is a well-regarded or well-respected chartered accountant from Montreal with his own firm there. He has graciously agreed to serve as the chief financial officer, at least in the formative years of Celerity. And then on the ground in Montana, we have two top-rate geologists. Fess Foster has been with the Boulder Project for roughly 20 years, so he brings a wealth of history, with him on the project. John Childs is formerly the head of exploration for Barrick in Montana, and is largely responsible for increasing the mine life of the Golden Sunlight mine that Barrick has there. So between Richard Capps and John Childs and Fess Foster, we're not short on technical talent. And as far as putting together prospectuses and 43-101s that are going to be necessary for this game plan, certainly we have the capability to do an awful lot of it internally, so the expense isn't going to be as large as it would be for a lot of other companies. Moving forward, just to talk briefly about our capital structure. We're not a big company, at least not at this time. We have 105 million shares issued. We're trading at about 8 cents. Market cap is 8.5 million. We trade on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the symbol of PMC. We're also increasingly active in trading on the United States market, on the OTCQB market. Just to talk briefly about our burn rate, we don't have a big burn rate as compared to many public companies. It's only about $25,000 or $30,000 per month. As of cash on hand, as of the last quarter, we had about 175,000 in hand. We're just in process of completing another private placement for roughly between 300,000 and 400,000 that's either being received or committed. And so that'll give us our burn rate covered for at least a year and a half, at least. We have a plan that I'm going to provide later on in the presentation that's going to cover all of our exploration expenses by external parties, but we'll get to that a little later on. This slide that you see here is the Boulder Copper Porphyry land position. Everything you see in that slide is our ground, including the mountain or hill ranges in the background. The property size is 14 square kilometers, which is huge for an exploration property. Most of our other properties are only about 1 or 2 square miles. Pardon me, did I say kilometers? I meant 14 square miles on this property. And so it's big. The reason it's big is because there's a big copper porphyry system that's underneath it that is open in many directions. We don't know how big it is exactly, but we do have some good historical data. And so to cover that, we needed a big ground position. Just to look at some of the maps where we're exactly located. On the left, there's a star there. It's just north of Butte, Montana, about 16 miles. And on the right, just as a refresher, Montana is just south of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And the topography is very similar to Canada when you drive from the east to the west. If you're driving across the eastern part of Montana, it's flat like a pancake. And as you get toward the foothills, it gets a lot more interesting. And then you get to the Rocky Mountains. The Boulder is in the foothills, but it is completely accessible. You can drive throughout the entire property. It takes you a while because it's 14 square miles, but it's completely accessible. And then there's infrastructure available within the area, and certainly an extensive mining history of the region. So there's a lot of supplies and labor that can be had. The copper outlook, there is a growing long-term supply gap. This slide came from mining.com, and they're not the only ones that are saying this. Goldman Sachs is extremely bullish on copper. I won't get into the copper market here at all. I'll turn that over to Corey, who, as I mentioned, was formerly a metals trader. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was also a member of the New York Copper Club. Corey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the intro, Ted, and hello to my Montreal friends. I am from Montreal, moved away from the city really on my wedding date in 2008. Sorry that your Montreal Canadiens aren't doing so well this year, but I'm sure that will improve. But I shouldn't eat up my time because Ted gave me 2 minutes to talk about copper, and I love copper. And really to make the case for copper, it is a simple story. We know in mining production to expand or extend mines, that takes 3 to 5 years. Greenfield, 8 to 10 years. So supply is not a difficult number to measure. It's demand. And what we're seeing now is really the first inning and the top and with no outs of a demand surge for copper coming from battery and electrification demand. Ted talked about Goldman Sachs. I mean, just to throw out some numbers, I mean, the global supply of copper is around 20-something million tons a year, expected to peak in the next 2 years or so. The demand surge from electrification and battery metals that doesn't exist today, the conservative estimate is 5.5 million tons a year, and the more likely estimate is about 10 million tons a year by the year 2030. That type of surge will not be met by current supply. The supply gap is inevitable. The only way to narrow that supply gap or fill it is more projects and copper mining projects to get underway. Like I said before, there's a very important lead time in a big lead time in terms of extending, expanding, or greenfield. So in order to meet the supply gap at 2030, money needs to go into this sector today. The markets are a forward mechanism. They're very efficient. And the markets understand, and you've seen this move in copper. The recent move in copper is because the prices need to be higher so that those projects, those future copper projects, are economically viable for investment today to bring that supply online. If that supply does not come online, we're going to see some major shortages really in the latter half of this decade. Goldman Sachs thinks that that price today, or certainly in the next 12 months, needs to be $15,000 per ton, which translates to about $6.80 per pound. That is quite an increase from even today's price, which has already seen a very attractive return over the last year. So I love copper. I loved this project before even this recent electrification and battery metal surge and forecast. But certainly in the climate that we're in, it just couldn't be more fortunate to have this project, this property right now in development. Ted, I went over my time, I think. I apologize.
That's okay. It was very important. Thank you, Corey. So let's look a little bit closer at the Boulder Copper Porphyry and the opportunity. The Boulder property is comprised of 331 mining claims covering 6,620 acres, or like I said, almost 14 square miles. It's located only 16 miles northeast of Butte and 20 miles southwest of another big base metal mine, the Montana Tunnels. Butte, again, was the largest copper mine ever discovered in North America, and Montana Tunnels was also a major base metal deposit. The Boulder property in the middle there hosts a known copper porphyry system that's been identified, but it has only had limited exploration. When we talk about Butte being big, let's just have a quick look at Butte. The nickname for Butte was the richest hill on earth, and the reason for that was that at one time when they first started mining it, there was actually a mountain on top of that open pit that you see there. It was a hill, or a big hill, or a mountain, and the entire mountain was mineralized. And over the years, they took down that entire mountain and they kept on going into that open pit. So that open pit is over 1 kilometer deep that they mined. And underneath that open pit is about 10,000 miles of development and mining tunnels where the deposit just kept on going. It's still in production today, but the only figures that I could get or accurate figures for production was up until 2005. But up until that point in time, as you can see, there was a considerable combination of metal that came out of that property. It wasn't just copper. Recently, the other day, I added up what the current value of all of that metal was, or in today's metal prices, and it comes out to be $128 billion. So it's pretty significant. Montana Tunnels isn't as big, but still, there was $5 billion worth of metal that came out of Montana Tunnels, which is still a significant base metal mine. Coming back to that same slide or diagram that we looked at before, that is actually from the United States Geologic Survey. It was published in 1965. We've added some highlights so that it can be seen better. But the significant thing about this map is that there is a major trough or trend that's shown there in red that goes for roughly 40 miles, and it's contained within the Boulder batholith. And just for explanation, a batholith is a great big igneous rock unit that can be hundreds of miles long or miles wide. So within the Boulder batholith, there's this major magnetic low that goes for a certain trend. That also happens to be right in the heart of the Great Falls tectonic zone for geologists that are on the call. And the significant part, in addition to the low that goes for that trend, that in 3 cases there are more pronounced magnetic lows, one of which is at Butte, one of which is at the Boulder Property, and one of which is at the Montana Tunnels. As I mentioned earlier, the Butte produced $128 billion worth of metal in today's metal prices, and Montana Tunnels produced $5 billion. The one that remains underexplored is the one that we have, Boulder Property, that we're bringing forward today. So I would imagine you're asking yourself by this point in time, why is this property being underexplored, and how did a little company like Peloton manage to get its hands on it? So let's answer that. Let's take a look at the history. In 1965, the United States Geologic Survey published the regional magnetic map or data over the Boulder batholith, which showed the 3 major magnetic lows near Butte, the Boulder Property, and Montana Tunnels. Anaconda, which owned the Butte at the time, they staked what is currently the Boulder Property, and Anaconda, along with their joint venture partner Molycorp, drilled several deep holes into the property, targeting that regional magnetic map, and also a 1960s IP survey that they did. They intersected porphyry alteration at considerable depth. The depths were up to 1,500 feet is where they hit it. They hit it from surface down to, in other holes at 1,500 feet. They intersected the alteration, but they also intersected copper mineralization, low-grade copper. It's like between 600 and 1,000 ppms, which is like 0.1%, which is low, I agree, but it was over continuous widths that were massive, like 1,200 to 1,600 feet. Many years later, a junior company, OT Mining, they drilled some deeper holes in the system as well. They were drilling well over a mile away from where Anaconda drilled. They got similar kind of mineralization, and again over incredibly big widths, 1,200 up to 2,600 feet. Now that grade may or may not be turn anybody's crank, but where it's important is that represents what we think is a low-grade copper halo that surrounds the main porphyry system on that property. If you look at Butte, there's this massive low-grade halo that surrounds Butte. It's probably about 10 miles across, and it's all the same kind of grade. And then within the heart of the Butte system, there's what they called main stage veins, which were the metal-bearing main veins that they mined, and that's where all the metal came from. Towards the inner part of the system. So that, it's certainly a good target to get after. In 2005 and 2006, OT Mining did an extensive amount of geophysics using more modern techniques that could see deeper than what Anaconda could at the time. And they identified targets within that porphyry system that unfortunately were never ever drilled. Unfortunately, the main promoter that they had at the time died, and the remaining company was never really able to raise any money for the deep drilling that was required. And for some reason, they would never take any joint venture deals either. I know from personal discussion with different people over the years, there's been a litany of major mining companies that have had a look at that property. I know they were made offers, and I know for a fact that the Inmet made them an offer. Inmet was a major mining company. And I can say that because I actually have the document, the offering document. They offered them $7 million to earn an interest, and they turned it down. I don't know what the rationale or reasoning was, but anyway, it was never drilled. And so later on, they started losing the claims or dropping them, and a company called Westmount started acquiring claims in and around there. They staked about 217 claims. And then most recently, unfortunately, OT Mining had a major judgment against it in Montana, and the sheriff sold out the remaining amount of claims that they had there, and Westmount acquired or bought that from the sheriff. We subsequently acquired Westmount, and now the entire thing is into Peloton and into Celerity, and now that property can be explored properly. Now, I hope the geologists on the call aren't going to start throwing rocks at their computer screen for this analogy that I'm about to provide. But, you know, in a really simple way to think about a copper or a porphyry system in general is, you know, that diagram or that picture on the left where you've got the ice cream sundae and around the outside is whipped cream, you know, and whipped cream is, you know, pretty good. But as you get closer and toward the center, you get the even better stuff. And that's, you know, a simple little analogy for a porphyry system. What the historical drilling is being interpreted to be is the outer or distal zones of a porphyry system. And now from an exploration standpoint, what we need to do is to look within the heart or core of that system for the higher grade mineralization. And I think that point on the bottom is very important. In 2005 and 2006, there were extensive geophysical surveys done, and there were targets identified within the porphyry system that were never drilled. These surveys were with pretty good technology. That Quantec Titan 24 system has probably been the workhorse of IP geophysics for the last 20 years. It's still in use today. There were 2 matrix IP surveys done and an airborne magnetic survey that was done. So there are targets within there. We have, I should say, we have all of that data. We have including all of the field data that was collected in order to do those inversions, the geophysical inversions at that time. What we're looking at doing is taking all of that data and running inversions, geophysical inversions again. We're using the more modern computer technology that we think can produce 3-dimensional models for this property and the targets that were identified. What we might also consider doing is doing another survey over the entire property using a more advanced technology that is evolved by Quantec from the Titan 24. It's called the Orion 3D, and it can give you a complete subsurface 3-dimensional model of what you're dealing with. If you're interested, Quantec has on their website, if you look for the Orion 3D section, there are some videos of that system, and where they've modeled some copper porphyry systems in Chile. And it's really quite amazing what can be done with the geophysics today. So we've talked about the opportunity at Butte, and Corey has given us an insight into the emerging bull market on copper. So I think our timing is great as far as that goes. I don't want to omit our projects in Nevada. I want to bring up to speed there. We have 2 projects on the northeastern margin of the Long Canyon Trend, and we have 1 project that is on the Carlin Trend itself. All 3 projects are located in the northeastern corner of Nevada, and all 3 of them are located in Elko County. this is in a nutshell why we're in Nevada. If Nevada was a country, it would be the 5th largest gold producing country in the world. And so if you're a junior mining company looking to find a gold deposit that ideally a major mining company will take you over for at some point in time, Nevada is a pretty good place to start. Just to summarize all 3 projects on one slide, all 3 are Carlin style gold exploration projects. We've taken all 3 from, very, very grassroots to they're all now drill ready. They've all got great drill targets. We've done extensive geologic mapping, geophysics, geochemistry, hyperspectral analysis, and imaging. You name it, from surface, we've done it. There's done some limited drilling. And so now it's time to move those projects forward. And it's also the point at time where the bigger money is going to be required. So what we've decided to do is we to accelerate the exploration on these projects, we've decided to bring in joint venture partners on all 3 of them. All 3 of them are permitted and bonded for drilling, so they're ready to go. The way the joint venture deals would look like, and we don't have anything signed at the moment. We're going to start pursuing that strategy more aggressively. But the way those permits or deals would look is that basically they would have to spend many millions in order to earn about a 75% interest, and we would keep a 25% working interest in each project. Now, you might say that 25% is not all that significant, but I would bring up the Long Canyon deposit itself that was discovered about 10 years ago by a company called Peloton Minerals from Vancouver. They were taken over at $14 a share by Newmont, and the total transaction value was $2.3 billion. So if we only have 25% of that, we're still not doing too bad. So just to wrap up, I was thinking of putting up a milestone slide with all kinds of things to check off as we move forward, like line cutting and geophysics and so on and so forth. But I'm not so sure that any of that really tells you, if and when the stock is going to go up. So I just thought I'd throw out what we see as our ideal scenario for the company, both in the immediate term and the longer term. And the way we see it on the shorter term is that we want to end up with a portfolio of copper and gold exploration projects that each have a large scale potential, and all of them are funded by external sources while we retain a meaningful interest in each project, be it 25 to 35%, either directly or indirectly. With the Boulder Copper Porphyry project, that plan is well underway, and that will end up being funded by Celerity, and we'll keep an interest in Celerity. The 3 Carlin-style gold projects, we're now initiating that process to bring in joint venture partners there, and I don't think we're going to have very much trouble because 75% of the gold that's produced in Nevada comes out of Elko County. So Elko County's in an exploration way, it's like the equivalent of having New York City real estate. So as I say, I don't think we're going to have much trouble. We do have a non-disclosure agreement in place for one of the projects already, and we're moving forward with the other 2. We also have a past producing mine project in Nevada or in Montana that we haven't discussed today. We already have a joint venture partner in place for it, and I had a meeting with them in the last few weeks, and apparently they're going to go ahead with a pretty significant geophysical program there. So in the immediate term, the game plan is to end up with 5 good exploration projects that are all funded by external sources. In the longer term, what that means is, of course, it reduces the dilution for shareholders considerably. The other thing is that it spreads the risk across a portfolio of highly prospective projects. And if you compare this to an investment portfolio or your brokerage account, where if you have one stock, you're subject to the risk of that one stock. Whereas if you spread your portfolio over 10 or 20 investments, your risk is considerably diversified. And then we have the upside potential on all 5 of them. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of exploration activity as it ramps up on all 5 projects at a minimum. And success can come from any or all of them. They all are very merited projects. So we're looking forward to the exploration and moving forward on all of them. That concludes my my remarks for today, and I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much, Ted, Corey, Paul. We do have quite a few questions, so let's get started with the Boulder property. Let's start off here at the beginning. Do you have the Celerity spin-off numbers for the Peloton shareholders? Like, how does that look?
No, we're working on the structure for that, and as we put that a little bit further together, we'll be publishing that. And I should also say that there are been no record dates set yet for the dividend or any of these transactions.
Okay, and you mentioned 2022, right? That was the target date for the spin-out?
Right, sometime during 2022. There's quite a few things to be done. There's some field work that we need to do on the Boulder property itself. There's completing a 43-101 technical report that will have that field work completed in it. The next step, of course, is a prospectus, and then filing all of that with the securities commissions and filing the listing application. So there's quite a number of steps. We estimated when we first announced this project in August 31st, we estimated that the entire process would probably take about up to 1 year. I personally don't think it'll take that long. I'm kind of hoping for 6 months, but we are subject to delays on the regulatory side,
Of course.
or COVID or what have you.
So then from now until the spinoff, there will be work being done on the property, because that was one of the questions. You will be advancing.
Yeah, there'll be activity going on, and we'll be publishing that as we go along. We do, as I mentioned, we have the geophysics, or the historical geophysics that was done on that property. We want to have some of our technical people and geophysicists take a serious look at that data before releasing it or releasing any version of it. And so that's the kind of thing that we'll be working on over the next little while.
So that was actually one of the questions I had here. So how much of the past data that you have on the project is usable? All of it, or how does that?
Yeah, all of it. The only problem is that the entire property might not be covered or isn't completely covered by the geophysics. A good percentage of it is, probably 75 or 80%, but we want to make sure that they're fill in some of those gaps, just so that we have the entire picture before we start any drill work.
So is the Boulder project just copper, or is there other minerals on the project?
We would expect that there'll be other minerals not unsimilar to Butte. Certainly there is moly, because in those Anaconda drill holes, they also assayed for moly. So there's copper, moly for sure. We would anticipate there's going to be other things, probably some gold and silver in there as well.
Okay. And what was the initial funding on Celerity?
The initial funding hasn't started yet, so
Okay.
So we will be getting on our horse here in the next little while. As I mentioned, Corey has an investment banking background, and he will be the lead and as the president. Myself, I'm going to be the chairman. Paul will also be on the board as another Peloton representative, and of course Michael Litwin, the chartered accountant, and then the technical person that we'll be adding to the board. We're sorting out that right now. There's no shortage of people to pick from, but.
Okay, and just before Paul Benwell comes on, just a couple of questions about your other properties. What are your plans to start drilling on those properties?
Well, as I mentioned, the game plan is to bring in joint venture partners on all three of them and let them fund the next drilling programs. There are drill targets established on all of them, and each of them has a drill permit in place. And we've also bonded, you have to bond with the government for reclamation of drilling. So that bond is in place for all three of them as well. So they're basically ready to go. We think that the best use of our time right now is to focus on bringing Celerity forward and getting that whole project up and running. And at the same time, work on bringing in joint venture partners and let them really focus on each and every one of those projects to do them justice.
So then the joint venture partners will be the operator on the operators on those properties.
We would anticipate most of the time they want to become the operator. Some people are not comfortable. We're happy to step in as the operator if need be. We have people in Nevada that we can tap into in terms of drill geologists and geophysicists and whatever. So that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great. Paul Benwell, do you have a couple of questions for the Peloton team?
Yeah, I guess this one's for you, Corey. Can you explain the structure of Westmount and the ownership of Celerity, and where does Peloton come in? It's a Peloton subsidiary, but where do you stand? Like, what's the breakout, and who are the other shareholders in Celerity right now?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Well, the short answer is Celerity at the moment is 50% owned by Westmount, 50% owned by Peloton. There is an earn-in milestone that needs to be met in the first 12 months of the closing of the transaction, a small $600,000 payment to Westmount. I should say to the owner of Westmount, and on that payment, Celerity will then own Westmount Resources without any condition. We expect, as Ted mentioned, as we go out and raise funds, that structure will change, but at the moment it's a simple 50-50.
Okay. All right, that answers that. Now, I guess Ted or Paul, you already have a joint venture on one of your properties, right?
Right, and that's the other Montana project that we didn't really talk about today.
No, exactly. Have they done any drilling on that? Is any results like coming due on that, or what's the status there?
Not recently. They did a drill program about a year and a half ago. They were in the process of relisting their company on the Toronto Stock Exchange or the Venture Exchange. So they held off on doing any further work until they achieved that listing, which they've now done. And as I mentioned, I had a meeting with them a few weeks ago, and they've decided to go ahead with a pretty significant geophysical program on that property. From talking to the geologists involved in that property, they think the best step forward is to do some geophysics to really get an idea on what the size of that structure is. Nobody really knows, and so that's going to be a lot more valuable than any drill hole would be at this point in time.
Okay, Corey, I guess for you, you're more familiar with the Boulder property.
Yeah.
Who are the majors around there now? I mean, I know it's a big territory, but like, and are there any producing mines in place right now in the area?
So in terms of producing mines, we know that Butte is still producing at the Berkeley pit. And Paul T, I might need it's American Pacific, I think is the name. I know it used to be called the Madison Project and recently changed their name. And I would actually recommend that anyone on the line, and we'll get the name right before the end of this call, but that's a project that's very close by to Boulder, where Rio Tinto just made an enormous investment and not producing at the moment, but that gives you a good sense of the activity in Montana and the interest in Montana. I would also point to the Black Butte property, which has received a significant investment from an Australian group recently. So we're seeing a lot of activity in Montana really ramp up over the last few years, certainly much more than we've seen in the 10 years prior. And Paul, the name, do you so we get it right?
American Pacific, and they've
American
actually
Pacific.
Presented here on Benwell a couple of times. Excellent organization, and so one of Paul Benwell's favorites and Sophie's.
And that's located, I think it's about 30 miles from the Boulder property. They're southeast. Yeah.
All right. Now, with with the US government putting a lot of metals on their strategic plan, copper, I'm assuming, is one of them. Do you have access to any, I guess there's a question for all of you. Do you have access to any US funds, like government funds, on the state level, federal level, or are you just on your own?
We haven't, to be honest, we haven't looked into that yet, but we are aware of a lot of these metals becoming, more strategic in terms of the
Yes.
United States, and in Canada, we're seeing some contribution by the federal government to, help cobalt processing, for example, that kind of thing. And I think the United States is going to end up being the same. One thing on that topic, there on our blog, on our website, there's a CNN video that was done a number of years ago that talks about the Butte, and it talks about the significance of Butte fueling or providing the copper and the metals for the infrastructure that was built in the United States. Like all of the copper wire in the United States probably came from Butte. Same with World War II. All the copper that was needed for all the mechanisms that went on there, that largely came from Butte, and it was, of course, it was strategic to the United States because of the the U-boats in the Atlantic, and you couldn't necessarily get copper from very many other places. So that's potentially something that may well happen again.
Okay, I guess one final question, two parts. Do you need permits on the Boulder property, like to do geophysical, to walk around, doing work on the property? Or can you do that work without drilling permits or other things?
Yeah. So the drilling permit, for drilling, you need a permit, whether you're in Montana or Nevada or anywhere. And so we're initiating that process now, fairly early. All of that land is held by the United States Forestry Service, and which is a different government entity than the Bureau of Land Management, where our land in Nevada is held. They both have their quirks as far as the permitting process goes. That property was fully permitted at one time by the United States Forestry Service, so we don't anticipate that there'll be any difficulty in just reapplying for what was granted before. To do geophysics, we don't need any permitting, as long as we're not cutting down trees or that kind of thing, which we won't be. So yeah, so we can do an awful lot of work prior to the drill permitting coming without having to wait for regulations or permits.
Okay, so from now to the spin out, you can actually get some work done, and you can get a better handle of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, one last question. Are you a copper company or a gold company? And the other part of that is, are you an explorer or a miner?
We're an explorer, and I don't think we're a copper or a gold company. What we look for is elephants, and so really our objective is to put together projects that, like I said earlier, ultimately a major mining company is going to want to buy. The timeline to production from discovery these days is about 14 years. And we know that our shareholders are patient, but I'm not so sure that they're that patient. So what we want to do is get in, do a good job of the exploration, put together the deposits, and ultimately either sell or get bought out by a major mining company. That applies to both Celerity and to Peloton.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. The update was much needed for everybody to get a better handle on what's going on with this acquisition. So now we know where everybody stands. Thanks to everyone for attending. Any further questions, please direct them to Sophie or I, and we'll forward them to Ted, Corey, or Paul, and they can handle them. So again, thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank
It was
you,
a pleasure,
everyone.
Corey. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.